Hey everybody, how are you? This is Kevin and Marina from RPH Ally and the Herbalism channel, Herbalism Show. Had some technical difficulties on our side before coming in, and I think Western medicine has some technical difficulties. So we're going to try to plug in Chinese medicine here and see what you guys can learn about it and how to incorporate it into your practices. Stay tuned. We're going to hit the reel and we'll be right back. Right. Hey, everybody. I'm really excited for today's episode. I think that it's always neat to learn more. And after talking to Marina, usually I always take your conversations with me, Marina, and bring them to the pharmacy, the family, everybody in between, because you're just such a fantastic teacher. And today, traditional Chinese medicine is going to open up some new doors for all of us. So let's jump in and let's hear some more. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I was just telling you before we got on about the smog from the Canadian wildfire. So it's looking better out there today than it did yesterday. It was kind of frightening, apocalyptical sort of scene outside, like very dark and muggy, and can't see what I'm used to seeing out of the window. So
Oh, totally understand. It's so nice that sunshine that's medicine all in itself. So when we get smoke coming in, it makes it difficult. I remember lots of drives, Marina, back and forth to the hospital that I'd take when we were having wildfires that I had to turn my AC and everything off just to circulate internally because the smoke was so bad and didn't make it as beautiful. And I always felt bad for the wildlife as we were going down the road.
yeah. So I mean, it's really nerve-wracking, and I don't even know the reason behind the wildfires. Could be due to climate change, or not even sure. But yeah, I mean, it's things like this that really show us that we need to be taking better care of our earth and our planet.
Yeah, I mean, there's some natural cycle kind of elements to it. There's some changes in all of our environment that come to it, and it's just nice to, I guess, have a better embrace of our environment, what's going on. And so there's our segue, Kevin's segue of going into the natural environment and the natural kind of ebbs and flows of our body, and learning more about traditional Chinese medicine to get a better connection to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're a master at segues. So that's exactly really what the purpose of the Chinese medicine system is. And many different cultures, as we keep hitting on throughout our shows, really develop their own ways of looking at the body and what's called energetics of the body. So before we had the scientific method and the microscope and ways to really answer some of our questions of like are things changing and taking form, and how our diseases are progressing, and kind of the behind the scenes of how things happen. We have developed theories, right, and stories to explain some of the natural phenomena that we see both outside of us and within us. And really, these ancient systems like Ayurveda, which we'll talk about next time, and traditional Chinese medicine have developed ways to explain, before we knew what an atom and a molecule was, it's like, what are these maybe elements or principles or energies that are moving through the body, and how the purpose of medicine was really to harmonize and balance these elements. So whatever is out of balance, out of harmony, that's what's causing the illness. And we know in modern day terms, that is exactly what the body does. There's a homeostasis that we want to always go back to preserve all of our vital systems and organs. And we have delicate feedback cycles, mostly negative feedback cycles, and some positive ones when it makes sense, to help us re-regulate back into health, back into homeostasis. So it's not that health is this static, thing that either you're healthy or you're not. It's not black and white like that. It's always dynamic. You're always trying to get to a better state. Believe it or not, your body is always trying to heal itself and get back to a healthier state. And it's always prioritizing what is most important for survival first and foremost. And then, of course, it's up to us to help the body thrive, with the right care and the right elements as well. We can actually assist our body, or we can be in our body's way of trying to heal itself. So all of these systems are really just trying to explain these phenomena so that we can really look at the body as a microcosm of the grander scheme. So whatever elements that they would observe on the outside of us, so such as the 5 elements, or what's known as 5 phases of the traditional Chinese medicine system, it's this dynamic balance and transformation from one phase to another. It flows. It's not that we have these 5, elements and then we can really quantify them. It's just about what is happening on our individual body and qualifying these aspects and these energies when there was a time where we couldn't quantify it. So all we can go by is really like looking at the symptoms, looking at the body, looking at everything we can observe with the 5 senses without the technology that's available now, and trying to formulate hypotheses of what's out of balance and how do we bring the body back into balance. So in this case, we can see there's wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And so they also have either negative feedback cycles between themselves where one would regulate the other. So it would just kind of be almost like a scale, but since there's 5 elements, they all work either how you see like that star shape, or how they flow into one another. So you can see it as like a cycle of the year, right? Yep. So, we have the earth associated with the fall or late summer. Then we have metal, it's like autumn, water, winter. Then we have wood, spring, and fire, summer. So it represents multiple things. It could represent times of day. It represents times in somebody's life. So it's really just a system that you develop once, and you could apply it to so many facets of both health and the outside world.
Interesting. So when this relates to medicine and the way that we think about like our bodies and the changes in our bodies, give me an example, Marina, of like a life stage or something else that if I came in and I saw a traditional Chinese practitioner, what would they walk me through, and how would these elements play a role?
Yeah, absolutely. So they would look at your physical body, right? And if they are practicing acupuncture as well as herbalism, they would probably use a combination of manual therapy and like reading the meridians, and making sure your chi is not stagnant or stuck anywhere, because the belief is that your chi is your life force, and it's also sort of energetic. And it's not the same as like, let's say, blood, but you can think of it as something that like blood should be moving and flowing and shouldn't just be stuck, and form clots and problems and things like that. So it's this energetic quintessential energy that you can imagine. However, it's believed that illness really starts if that energy is not moving, right? And you can think about blood too. You want things to be circulating. You want to be bringing food in. You want to get food out. And life is all about dynamic and movement. So when you move, you live. When you don't move, you die. So that's really the principle. And then another principle you can think of is temperature, right? So this is more of like an eclectic Western American principle, but they also believe that if the body is in heat or even fever, it's a sign that the body has life in it and it's fighting for life, and you want the body to be at a certain heat, right? And we have that temperature thermostat built in too. And the colder you are, like if you're not able to generate heat for yourself, then the closer you are to death. So all of these things, it's just like we kind of forget about it when we just treat our body as a bunch of like biochemical reactions and like a chemical soup, and then we treat it with more chemicals. But the thing is that it's biochemical and it's also physical. So this is literally, and the assessment in Chinese medicine would be to look at you physically, look at the body, and also at your tongue, read your pulse to also discern how is the blood moving through your vessel. And you almost kind of can feel, and we use 3 points to read the pulse. And it's not just about calculating the rhythm. It's about like really feeling that quality of how the blood is flowing through your veins, and how it's changing from one point to another. And you can really tell a lot about the integrity of a blood vessel and how the blood is flowing through those practices. You also, I think we talked about taste buds and tongue in the past. So there's ways that you can read the tongue and determine what is going on with your internal organs and between those 5 elements, and what's maybe driving a disbalance of something. And then there's ways to kind of tell which element do you have excess of, which one do you maybe not have enough of. There's also a concept of yin and yang. So yin is like that feminine, solid, dark, moist place. And we can talk about what those places are in the body. And yang is like that expansive, sun, masculine, energetic, active type of entity. And all of us have both. We're not just, one or the other. We're, no matter what gender you are, we have both aspects. And in health, we can also apply that to organ systems and to lots of different nuances. And it's really just about understanding that your individual body thrives in a specific proportion of these elements and this yin and yang. And we just try to figure that out based on the person, based on both what we observe physically by those things that I mentioned, and also asking the person about their emotions and how they deal with stress and what goes on with them and what are their symptoms, right? And just figuring out what does that tell us about that imbalance. And then we either, like, let's say if, the person chooses to do acupuncture, we can work on the meridians and those organs that are affected. And then with herbs, they can do the same thing.
Wow. I think for the audience, I pulled this up because I think the interesting elements that you're pointing toward there, Marina, are like the balance elements, like the flow components. And it's fascinating. This is a John Hopkins illustration here. But when we're looking at traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine and those two little groupings there, or those two columns, the one thing that's, kind of stated is qualitative versus quantitative, right? Is the kind of comparator there. And it is fascinating how we limit our bodies to just one or the other. And you've told me, I think, several times that yes, Chinese medicine is looking at qualitative, but also at quantitative, elements. So there might be a little bit of a adjustment that the Marina definition would apply here. But when we're talking about the two and kind of comparing the two to each other, as we break them down, the one thing I'm hearing you kind of point toward that's so interesting to me is like the natural flow and progression of our bodies. And now seeing more and more data coming back with wearable technology and cycles that we're going through that we're now starting to recognize to an even greater degree. I was just reading about something called RATE, R-A-T-E, and it's being used by the Department of Defense to be able to detect disease at early stages. And so they're seeing some algorithmic responses the body is making to being impacted by disease quite early, up to 7 days prior to disease hitting and showing symptoms, overall. And so I think there's so much correlation from what you were saying to what we're starting to experience and understand in the modern world, because we're becoming more technologically advanced. I don't know if I want to say that exactly, but we're having technology that is allowing us to see more of what was trying to be done by traditional Chinese medicine. We're seeing the flows and the changes in the natural progressions, and not just taking a snapshot. One thing to point out is like an echocardiogram or a blood pressure reading. Like there are so many things that we're taking a snapshot inside of Western medicine and not getting a full picture. And now that we're starting to take more comprehensive understanding of these, our treatment regimens are changing, and the way that we're like moving our algorithms inside of even Western medicine are changing. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but at least for me, I wanted to draw that together because I'm seeing it from another perspective that we're getting closer and closer to utilizing more of these traditional ways of healing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even a blood sample, right? Depending on what time of day or what time of month you're drawing that sample, it could look very different. Even a blood pressure reading, right? You can just measure it every 5 minutes and get a different reading. So so many factors that we have that are confounding variables that happen to us on a daily basis, and then how we respond to them changes what happens in our physiology. And it's really just a matter of like that robust picture, that holistic picture of how you move through these things, you know, through your day and through your week and through your month, that really shapes your overall health, versus a snapshot that can't tell you, you know, what even though it's exact and precise, it doesn't really give us that full picture either. So we need to put more pieces to the puzzle. And you know, with this system that I mentioned, you know, about dynamic and flow, that's that principle understanding that, you know, it's not going to be exact. It's impossible to get it exact. But again, nature has the elements that we need for our body to regulate itself. So that's the premise. Like, how do we use these analogies, and how do we use the concepts of yin and yang, and knowing that one is not possible without another. Like, we can't have a sympathetic system without a parasympathetic counterbalance. We need both. We need, you know, to be able to flee. We need to be able to relax. And we need to tap into how ancestrally our genes were wired, and how do we use them now in our modern era, which is so different than we used to. You know, we used to have different needs, which is why we're genetically wired certain ways. And now we need to live in a different environment, and we need to consciously start to change the way we approach life.
Man, I love that. This graphic, when I saw it, grabbed a couple graphics this morning, and I was like, this one is something I really am excited to talk to Marina about. So on the left side is their opinion of what Chinese herbalism looks like. And the other one is the red side is Western herbalism, kind of the focus. And I was hoping, Marina, with these last few minutes we have, you could kind of walk us through these thought processes and how we can start integrating these processes into our care delivery.
Yeah, I think this is the most interesting, fascinating, and probably difficult concept from somebody coming from an allopathic background to move from the right side to the left side, right? Because we will put more weight on that scientific, rigorous, analytical side of things, where we're going to prioritize, okay, what's the biochemistry here? What are the phytochemicals? What are the properties? What receptors are they targeting? How do we isolate them and standardize them so that we know the exact dose? You know, and regulate and control for every single factor that can be a confounding variable, right? And yes, that's one side of the puzzle. Again, we can't just rely on that piece. That's helpful. Absolutely. I use that because I know that, and I was trained in it. It's part of what I consider. But then also, how do we treat that terrain, right? It's all about the terrain. How is this individual body? What support does it need? What is that root cause that's presenting as these symptoms? Because if we're just looking at the symptom level, we're not necessarily treating the root cause, and we might be actually masking the symptoms so that they can't even tell us how progressively that root cause might be getting worse over time, and we keep covering and covering them up, it becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I think just to echo some things, if folks have been listening to our show or listening to Marina for quite some time, there's some things that were so easy for me to pick out, like on the comparison of one side to the other. And one to really highlight here is this: herbs are rarely prescribed individually, most commonly in formulas on the Chinese side. And so listening to Marina and talking about the complexity of plants, you know, just in general, and all the balance components that they offer, makes so much sense of putting them together. Literally the other day, I was just in the pharmacy talking to somebody about using turmeric and the incorporation of pepper, and how those two things can play an interweaving role on the effectiveness and anti-inflammatory response with that one treatment. And so it's interesting to me that there's maybe too much emphasis on understanding what one thing does versus the relationships of things. So that was one that screamed Marina to me. But this one is one that I would love for you to talk about, Marina, for a second, is just herbs are selected based on underlying pattern of dysfunction versus herbs are selected based on presenting symptoms. Does that really weave back into those 5 elements we started with?
Yeah, exactly. So what I mentioned before about just treating the symptom, you may not actually address what's actually causing the symptom. So when you look at the pattern and you understand what element is out of balance, what organ system, and in Chinese medicine, the organs don't always 100% correlate to the physical organs that we know them to be today, but they have the same names and sometimes they do correlate very well. And so it's about supporting understanding, is there an excess or a deficiency in that organ system, or what is the pattern? And it can kind of create a more robust picture too, where it's not just um, we're painting that balance, right? So if one element is excess, the other one may not necessarily be deficient. So we might just focus on bringing this down. But if both things are out of balance, then we might want to work on both of them. And then they can create a huger, like a bigger disturbance if they're both out of balance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of what can give us insight into how we want to approach things and which element we want to focus on. And then there's, again, within that 5 element or phase pattern, we can either go right after that element, or we can go after the element that either feeds it or takes away from it. So that's why we really work with formulas a lot in Chinese medicine specifically. But almost all the time, I'm not just like, oh, you need this one herb, it's going to solve all your problems. The beauty about herbs is they are more complex. So one herb could hit a lot of the targets that we want, but I still find myself, you don't want to just eat one food. One food could be healthy for you, but you do want to rotate. You want to give the body as many building blocks that are diverse and complex, that the body is going to be wiser knowing how to play with those building blocks versus you logically formulating all of that and knowing beforehand what the body is going to do. So it's really about playing with that interface that we talked about last time between the body and the plants.
I always love how much you make me think, and sometimes it just brings me down so many rabbit holes on like, our treatment algorithm's the right way to go about it, Marina. We just prescribe one drug and we hope that's going to work for the rest of our lives. Guess what? That's a problem for lots of us. And so maybe changing those things out, and like you said, adding variety is important. Everybody, I'm hoping you're really enjoying it. Thank you everyone for joining. If you guys have any questions, hit us up, let us know. You can join Marina's Herbalism channel to get more info. She's got a bunch of things for sale, and please connect with us on our phli.com. She's got another event popping up here really soon too. Marina, do you want to plug that before you go?
Which one is that?
I think you have an educational event coming up really soon. Is that right?
I don't know, actually. You got me thinking. I don't know. Do I?
She'll have one coming up really soon. We'll tell you about it next time. All right, everybody.
Okay, yes.
Have a
All
good
right,
rest of the day. Bye-bye.